Thank you for joining us today on 10 Minutes with the Artist, an episodic series that explores the art practice and the personal vision that guides artists. On today's episode, we're very proud to have Aaron Kirchhoff, who exhibited his recent artworks at the 2016 Visual Arts Faculty Exhibition at the Memorial Union at North Dakota State University. Aaron's glass works are delicately crafted, and they give the impression of both fragility and strength. There is an elegance to the celebration of form and a nod to the history that invoked the shape, pattern, and nature of the structure within a larger system. My name is Anthony Ferris, and this is 10 Minutes with the Artist. So thank you so very much, Aaron, for joining us today on 10 Minutes with the Artist. So one of my immediate impressions when I'm thinking about glass blowing is I'm thinking about the creation of vessels. And I was curious if your pieces in harmonious disorder were vessels.
Excellent. I think that they could be considered vessels in some ways, and in other ways they're closed objects. To use the term vessel really implies that it has a utilitarian aspect to it, and these do not. These were created to be able to observe the morphology of vascular systems in an abstracted way. So I think that if I had to decide one or the other, is it a vessel or not, I would say no, it's not a vessel, especially in the traditional sense of vessel making is concerned, either in glass blowing or ceramics.
So in the these like vascular systems, there's usually openings and there's a path that something goes through. So why are these closed off, and is there anything sort of navigating through them?
They're closed off for a few reasons. I felt that it was appropriate for the overall structure and the aesthetics of these objects to close them. Typically, of course, vascular systems and things that pass fluid or gases through them are not going to be closed. It's a little bit of a technical trick to close tubes at atmospheric pressures, and I wanted to display that as a technical proficiency that I was able to achieve. I think that to the untrained eye, it's probably not apparent at all, but to another glass blower or to another fabricator, they might be able to see that, and then, it would warrant a certain amount of respect for the work itself. So that's one element to it, is that it's an exercise in technical proficiency, and I think also, though, it helps with the concept of abstracting the shapes from true vascular systems, that they are in fact closed off, and it therefore negates any utilitarian purposes it might have, or any model that it might represent real vascular systems, so that it prevents that from happening for the viewer, and you can't actually wonder, well, is this something that could be implemented for scientific research? It commands no. In fact, it is an art object. Yeah. And I think that in my field, or I guess the interdisciplinary nature of my work, often these objects can pass back and forth between more than one field, and I felt that closing off the objects committed it to fine art.
Okay. There are these, with the arrangement of the pieces, there are these two states. One is very solid and stable, and then there's these other pieces that are hovering in a very precarious way, and there's movement to them. And I was wondering why these pieces exist in two different states.
Yeah. There's a number of reasons for that. I'll try to cover them succinctly. The objects, the larger objects that are suspended are, I think, equally meaningful from practically any angle that you want to view them, and there's a whole lot to look at as well. And I felt that suspending them will invite the audience to approach the work and to examine it and be able to watch it as it rotates gently in whatever breezes might be in the gallery. And so it's a mechanism of engaging the audience, and it also provides a dynamic element to the work so that the work itself is relatively dynamic, and it accentuates that, I think, in a way that is appealing to a viewer. It's also possible to have set them all out so that they're static on the table. I just felt, though, that the contrast between the two, having some that were hanging and some that were on the table, would provide an opportunity for the viewer to interact with the objects in whichever way was most natural for them. So the goal being to connect with as many people as possible.
Your piece with the responsibly harvested nest conjures up a past. There's this narrative that's sort of created when people walk in and they look up at the ledge, and then they look down at the nest, and they look down at the eggs, and then the eggs, one of them is broken. And I was curious why activity was so important to that piece.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it conjures up a history there, that there is an event that occurred in time, and that this documents what a state of the object before this event occurred, and it articulates what happened during the event and then the current state of it. And sorry, what was the question?
Oh, the question was why activity was so important to
activity?
Viewing it and sort of imagining this narrative of something happening instead of it just being static. Why am I so inclined to feel this visceral reaction and fear in a way that something got broken, and then ownership and responsibility?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. I would say that the history that's involved there draws the viewer in through imagining that event, and that they can more accurately participate in the tragedy of what's being represented through being able to examine the event itself and some of the remnants of this event, and to give thought to time relative to that object, and in what was the state of this thing before the event occurred, and was this something that could have been prevented or mitigated. And I think that effectively permits them to participate in a more real way, a more meaningful way, rather than just having an object sitting for them to look at.
Yeah. It's really interesting, this idea of the viewer integrating their imagination and a narrative into these things, because you have these glass eggs, and they speak to extinct and threatened bird species, and they speak to sort of the reproduction of them, but it's sort of futile in a way. So I was kind of curious why the eggs look so real, to the point that they look like they're something that I want to interact with, and there's a truthfulness to them. And I was wondering why they look so real, why they really speak to that.
Yes. My response regarding realism is a nod and a recognition to naturally occurring beauty, whatever it is we decide that is beautiful, that there are patterns and shapes and objects, lines that exist that are reminiscent of what objects and elements that we call beautiful. And so I wanted to be able to represent that. Again, with the technical proficiency, I think that it was necessary. I get excited by the idea of being able to demonstrate technical proficiency, so being able to accurately render biological forms or something that's naturally occurring that took eons, hundreds of millions of years to evolve, and I can replicate that in such a way that it's convincing, to me is it's an achievement and something that I can be proud of. It also, I think, drives home the I think it provides the ability for the viewer to connect with the idea itself, in that there is nature in front of them, and that's really what it speaks to, is the interrelationship between man and nature. And so I felt it was necessary to represent that well, to really give something that is very meaningful visually.
Yeah.
And I felt that realism helped to achieve that.
I felt a connection with the pieces, even though they are representations and not the real thing. I felt like it transcended it in a way. And I'm kind of curious. I don't know how to actually phrase this question, but each of your objects, the eggs, the sculptural glass pieces, the nest, they're all like sort of holding and protecting from a system in a way, or like they're like separating from a system. They're like almost like a closed system, but they're not really. They're just sort of like sort of incubating in a way, like in between things. And I was wondering if you could talk about that. Like, it's really like false security in a way, but it's security nonetheless.
Yeah. The idea that there are closed systems, I think, speaks to the isolation of an idea from a larger conversation, and that the objects themselves speak to larger issues, larger conversations that I think are relevant in society today, things that we need to talk about, things that are extremely relevant. And so making artwork provides an opportunity for me to make a small little environment that speaks to this larger conversation. So the succinct nature of the objects are really intended to speak to greater issues and to inspire conversation about that stuff and thought as well. So I think what appears to be security, or this safe little zone, is really false. I think that it demonstrates something that's deep and imminent and important.
Okay. Now, I guess my last question would be, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Wow. I think that I would like to begin to examine some of the bucolic imagery that is pervasive in 20th century glass paperweight making. Typically, things are rendered in really a bucolic type of idyllic way, and doesn't speak to issues of time or disease or decay or the interrelationships between biological systems, and that it's a huge field that's ready to start to be explored.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, thank you so very much, Aaron. I'd like to thank our guest, Aaron, and I'd also like to thank you for your time and your interest in the professional practice and the creative explorations happening here at North Dakota State University. So thank you, and for everyone here at the Memorial Union Gallery, keep creative.